Under the scorching sun of the savannah, the air shimmered like molten gold. Heat waves danced above the endless fields of yellow grass, each blade swaying lazily in the dry wind. Somewhere far off, the hollow calls of hornbills echoed, faint and uneasy, as if the land itself sensed that something was wrong. And then it came. A scream, sharp, deep, and desperate, tore through the stillness. It wasn't the cry of a predator. It wasn't the warning of prey. It was something far more haunting, the cry of a mother elephant calling for help. Her voice rolled across the plains, rattling the dry seed pods in the acacia trees. Birds burst from the branches in a frenzy, wings flashing white against the yellow sky. The sound struck the chest of a lone man standing atop a distant hill, making his heartbeat stumble. Down below, at the edge of a dried riverbed, a massive acacia tree lay collapsed, its roots twisted, its trunk sprawled across the earth like a fallen titan. Beneath it, pinned at the shoulder, was the mother elephant. Her massive body trembled as she strained against the crushing weight. Dust clung to her wrinkled skin, and her eyes, wide, gleaming, desperate, searched the horizon for salvation. Two calves circled her frantically, their high-pitched trumpets cutting through the heat. They nudged her with their small trunks, but it was no use. Every attempt to move only drove the pain deeper. From where he stood, the man could see it all. The broken tree, the desperate calves, the mother's heaving breaths. And though the distance between them was great, her cry had found him, and it demanded an answer. He didn't hesitate. Kicking up clouds of dust with each stride, the man descended the slope, the brittle grass crackling under his boots. The heat pressed down on him like an invisible hand, but the sound of the calves' cries pulled him forward faster than his body wanted to move. As he drew closer, the scale of the problem became brutally clear. The acacia tree's trunk was nearly as wide as a small car, its jagged branches jutting out like spears. It had pinned the mother elephant at an angle that left her unable to roll or shift her weight. Every labored breath shook her enormous frame, and a thin line of dark fluid traced down her side where the bark had bitten into flesh. The calves noticed him first. Startled, they backed toward their mother, their ears flaring, trunks raised in warning. One of them stomped the ground, releasing a sharp trumpet that echoed into the heat. The man stopped just a few steps away, breathing hard, and locked eyes with the mother. It was only a second, maybe less, but in that moment he understood. She wasn't going to hurt him. If anything, she was asking him to help. Reaching into the worn satchel at his hip, he pulled out a coiled rope, a battered crowbar, and a folded strip of canvas. He knelt beside the fallen tree, testing its weight with his hands. The coarse bark scraped his palms, and the sheer immobility of it sent a wave of dread through him. Alone, this was impossible. Still, he had to try. Looping the rope around the thickest part of the trunk, he wedged the crowbar deep into the dry earth and leaned into it with all his strength. His boots dug trenches into the dust, muscles in his back and arms screaming. The trunk shifted a fraction of an inch, then groaned and settled back, unmoved. The mother let out a low, rumbling call, so deep it seemed to vibrate in his chest. Her trunk extended toward him, brushing his shoulder gently, almost as if to say, "Don't stop." He repositioned, pulled again, teeth clenched, sweat dripping into his eyes. Still nothing. Then what a sound in the distance. Heavy, rhythmic. Slow at first, then growing louder. The calves froze, ears twitching toward the horizon. The man's heart pounded. Out here, those steps could belong to predators just as easily as help. Dust swirled in the heat haze. Massive shapes emerged. 6 elephants, their silhouettes wavering in the golden shimmer. At their head was a colossal bull, one tusk broken, his gaze locked on the trapped female. For a long, tense moment, they stood in silence, the air between them charged with something ancient. Then the bull stepped forward. The bull's massive feet sank into the dry earth with each step. He paused just a few meters from the man, towering over him, his single tusk catching the sunlight. His trunk lifted high, tasting the air, as if measuring the stranger's scent and intent. The man stood frozen, every instinct screaming to back away, but he held his ground. Behind the bull, the rest of the herd fanned out. 2 younger males and 3 females, each watching with unblinking eyes. A low vibration pulsed through the air, an unspoken language between them. The trapped mother answered with a faint rumble of her own, her trunk curling toward her calves. The bull moved closer to the fallen tree. With a sudden, deliberate motion, he pressed his trunk beneath one of the thick branches and pushed. The wood groaned, splintering faintly under the combined pressure of his sheer strength and the earth beneath it. The man's mind clicked into action. If the bull was pushing from this side, he could pull from the other. He scrambled around to the far edge of the trunk, adjusted the rope's position, and planted his feet deep in the dust. One of the younger females stepped forward, placing her forehead against the trunk. Her legs strained, muscles rippling under her wrinkled hide. The man heaved. The bull pushed. The younger female added her weight. The tree shifted, barely, but enough to make the calves trumpet in sudden hope. Then, without warning, a loud crack echoed through the savannah. A smaller branch splintered off, striking the man's shoulder and knocking him to one knee. Pain flared down his arm, but he bit it back. There was no time to stop. The sun beat down harder, the yellow light blinding, sweat stinging his eyes. His lungs burned. Every second the mother stayed trapped meant blood flow was being cut off to her leg. And that meant she wouldn't survive much longer. The bull repositioned, letting out a deep roar that reverberated across the plains. The rest of the herd responded. 2 more females stepped in, pressing their weight against the trunk. The man yanked on the rope with every ounce of strength left in his body, feeling the coarse fibers bite into his palms. The tree shifted again. This time, it didn't fall back. Dust erupted into the air as the weight began to give. The man's muscles screamed in agony, but he didn't let go. Inch by inch, the massive trunk began to roll away from the trapped shoulder. The sound of the wood scraping against the earth mixed with the thunderous calls of the elephants, creating a primal chorus that drowned out everything else. The calves danced in tight circles, trumpeting wildly, their excitement almost frantic. One final push, one final pull. The bull's roar faded into a deep, steady rumble, and the rest of the herd seemed to draw strength from it. Dust swirled in thick golden clouds around their feet, the heat shimmering between their massive bodies. The man adjusted his stance, digging his heels into the dry earth. His arms felt like they were on fire, but the sight of the calves, frozen in anxious anticipation, forced him to ignore the pain. The mother's breathing was rapid now, each exhale a guttural groan that carried urgency. The bull shifted his position again, lowering his head so that the full weight of his shoulder pressed into the trunk. The younger females mirrored him, pushing in unison. The ground trembled beneath the force. The tree groaned, the sound almost like a scream of protest. The man's rope went taut, biting into the raw skin of his hands. He pulled with everything he had left, muscles trembling, his shirt clinging to him with sweat. The air smelled of crushed leaves, dry bark, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Then the tree moved, a real movement this time. Not the tiny, frustrating shifts from before, but a full roll of several inches. The change sent the calves into a frenzy, their trumpets slicing through the air. The mother gave a sharp, urgent call, her eyes suddenly bright with hope. But it wasn't over. The trunk was still pressing against her leg, and the ground beneath it had caved into a shallow groove, making the last bit of movement the hardest yet. One of the younger males in the herd stepped forward now, pressing his weight from another angle. The combined force of elephants and man strained against the stubborn weight. The man's vision blurred at the edges. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The world narrowed down to 3 things: the rope in his hands, the straining shapes beside him, and the deep, relentless will to move the tree. A loud, splintering crack erupted, the sound of a branch snapping deep within the trunk. The wood shifted again, rolling up and over the edge of the groove. For a moment, everything seemed suspended in time. The dust hanging in the air, the sunlight flaring off the elephants' backs, the man's breath frozen in his chest. And then, with a final, thunderous shove, the tree rolled clear. The massive trunk rolled just far enough to loosen the crushing pressure on the mother elephant's leg, but not enough for her to pull free. She let out a low, rumbling bellow that vibrated through the ground, her eyes wide with both pain and determination. The calves darted forward instinctively, touching her with their trunks as if to reassure her. The bull gave another commanding trumpet, a deep and resonant sound that made the younger elephants stiffen and push harder. Their unity was instinctual, a silent agreement that this moment was life or death. The man shifted his grip on the rope, his palms raw and slick with sweat. He repositioned his feet, finding better leverage against the earth. He could feel his body starting to falter, muscles trembling uncontrollably, lungs pulling in air that felt like it scorched his throat. The heat was oppressive now, as though the sun itself was pressing down on them, trying to smother their efforts. Dust coated his tongue, his eyes stung, but he kept pulling. The bull leaned in so far that the ground beneath his front feet began to sink into deep impressions. Another female wedged herself beside him, pressing her forehead into the bark until the skin along her temple wrinkled with the strain. The combined force made the tree creak and shift again. This time, the movement was greater, enough for the mother to slide her shoulder back an inch. She tested her leg, wincing, but she didn't stop. Her trunk reached forward, brushing one of the calves before curling into the air and letting out a sharp blast of sound, a cry of determination. The man's breathing turned ragged, each inhale sounding more like a gasp. But then something happened. He felt the weight change. The tension in the rope lessened, just slightly, as the elephant's combined force began to overpower the tree's stubborn grip on the earth. "Come on, come on," he muttered under his breath, his voice cracking from the strain. The tree shifted again, more dust exploding upward, coating everything in a golden haze. From within that cloud, the shape of the mother elephant's massive head began to rise, her leg almost free now. One more push, one more pull. The bull bellowed again, louder this time, the sound reverberating across the savannah like thunder rolling over the plains. Every elephant pushed with renewed strength. The man pulled so hard his shoulders felt like they might tear from their sockets. A deep snapping crack ripped through the air, the sound of the tree finally breaking away from the groove it had dug into the ground. And for the first time, the trapped mother elephant began to stand. The ground beneath them trembled with each push. The tree groaned like some ancient beast being forced from its resting place, its bark shedding in long, splintered strips. The man's boots slid forward in the dust, but he dug his heels in deeper, his entire body leaning backward against the rope. Every muscle screamed in protest, but his mind had gone silent. There was no room for pain now, only movement. The bull's eyes narrowed, ears fanning wide as he shifted his stance, pressing his massive shoulder harder into the trunk. The younger females grunted with effort, their trunks wrapped tight around the thicker branches to pull as they pushed. The calves bounced nervously around the mother's head, their small trumpets slicing through the heavy air. Another inch, another crack. The mother elephant's front leg began to slide free, leaving a deep indentation in the dust where it had been trapped. Her skin was raw where the bark had pressed, but she didn't falter. Her breathing quickened, the deep, resonant sound mixing with the chorus of straining elephants and the man's ragged gasps. The sun above seemed to pause, the light turning everything into a burning sea of yellow and gold. Sweat dripped from the man's jawline onto the rope, darkening the fibers. He bit down on the inside of his cheek and pulled again, a guttural sound escaping his throat. The bull let out a blast of air so loud it startled even the man. The herd responded instantly, each elephant throwing their weight into one final, coordinated effort. The ground shook, dust swirled into blinding clouds, and the tree shifted again, this time rolling several feet with a deep, rumbling thud. The trapped leg was free now, but the mother didn't move at first. She stayed still, testing her weight, her eyes darting from her calves to the man and back again. Then with a sudden and powerful surge, she stepped forward, shaking off the last of the branches that clung to her side. The calves rushed in, pressing against her legs, their excited trumpets echoing across the plains. But the moment wasn't over. The bull stepped back slowly, his massive frame towering over the man, the dust still swirling between them like golden smoke. The bull's gaze locked on the man for a brief moment, unblinking, assessing. Dust clung to the sweat running down his cheeks, the rope still trembling in his blistered hands. Every breath he took felt like it scraped the inside of his lungs. Behind the bull, the other elephants shifted their positions, forming a loose half-circle around the mother and her calves. A protective barrier, yet still ready to lend their weight if needed. The calves pressed closer to their mother's side, their small trunks brushing against her wounded leg, as if urging her to move. The man knew they weren't completely safe yet. The tree, though shifted, still leaned awkwardly, its heavier branches tangled and threatening to fall again if the wind caught them. One misstep could trap her all over again. Maybe even worse this time. The bull stepped forward once more, his single tusk glinting in the sun, and pressed his massive head into the trunk. The younger males mirrored him, their combined force making the ground quake under the man's boots. The sound was deafening now. The deep rumble of elephant calls, the groan of shifting wood, and the hiss of dust streaming into the air. The man braced himself, wrapping the rope tighter around his forearms, and pulled in sync with them, feeling the strain run like fire through his shoulders and back. Then, a sudden lurch. The trunk rolled farther than he expected, freeing not only her front leg but giving her the space to pivot her body away from the danger zone. Her ears flared wide as she tested her footing, the muscles in her flank trembling from the effort. The calves gave a chorus of trumpets, shrill, high-pitched notes that carried pure relief. One of them pressed its head against her chest, the other wrapping its trunk around her foreleg. But the mother still didn't move far. She remained where she was, her massive head slowly turning toward the man. For a few long seconds, they just stared at one another through the haze of golden dust. Two creatures from different worlds, united in the single moment that had just saved her life. The bull's deep rumble rolled through the air again, and the rest of the herd began to shift, making way for the final steps. The air between them seemed to thicken, heavy with heat and dust. The man's arms hung limp for a moment, trembling from the effort, but his eyes never left the mother elephants. In them he saw exhaustion, yes, but also an unwavering strength. The bull gave a slow step backward, allowing the man to see the full extent of the opening they had created. The mother shifted her weight tentatively, testing the freed leg. A visible shudder ran along her flank, her injured muscles protesting, but she did not falter. One of the younger females moved in closer, her trunk sweeping over the mother's side, brushing away clinging branches as if clearing the last remnants of danger. The calves stayed pressed to their mother's body, their small tails flicking rapidly, a nervous rhythm that betrayed their relief. The man took a cautious step forward, scanning the tree. Several branches still lay too close to her path. He dropped the rope, stepped around the trunk, and began dragging the lighter debris away by hand. The wood was rough and dry, scraping his palms, but every branch removed was another inch of safety. From behind him, the bull rumbled again, a sound so deep it seemed to vibrate through the soles of his boots. It wasn't a warning. It was something else. Encouragement. Urgency. The man worked faster. The sun was dipping slightly now, casting longer shadows across the yellow grass. If they didn't get her moving soon, the cool of night would bring predators closer to the scent of her blood. Finally, with the path cleared, the mother elephant's ears flared wide. She took a single, decisive step forward, the sound of her foot meeting the earth a deep, satisfying thud. Her calves shuffled with her, staying tight to her sides. But she paused again, her gaze sweeping the ground as though she were making absolutely certain she was free. The bull stepped forward to her flank, his single tusk glinting once more in the fading sunlight. He stood there like a silent sentinel, watching over her next move. The man could feel it in the air. The rescue was seconds away from completion. The mother's breathing was heavy now, her chest rising and falling like slow, powerful waves. Each exhale came with a faint, trembling rumble, the sound of an animal forcing herself to stay calm despite the pain. The man's heartbeat felt synchronized with hers, both of them locked into the same desperate rhythm. His hands still throbbed from the rope's bite, but he kept them ready, just in case the trunk shifted or the path needed clearing again. The bull stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of the mother, his massive body angled toward the open stretch of savannah beyond the tree. He lifted his trunk high, tasting the wind, scanning for any sign of threat. The rest of the herd adjusted instinctively, forming a loose protective wall around the mother and her calves. The calves, sensing the moment was close, became restless, nudging their mother's legs, circling her, occasionally letting out short, impatient trumpets. She responded each time with a soft, reassuring rumble, her trunk brushing over their backs. A faint gust of wind rolled through, carrying with it the smell of dry grass and distant rain. The sound of loose branches shifting underfoot drew the man's attention back to the tree. It still loomed there, huge and ancient, its weight finally no longer trapping her, but its presence still menacing. He took another step back, giving her space. His body ached, his shirt clung to him, and his lungs burned with each breath, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. She took another step forward, this time with more certainty. The freed leg bore her weight without collapsing. Her tail flicked once, twice, and then stilled. The bull rumbled again, lower and longer than before, a sound that seemed to sink into the earth itself. One of the younger females echoed it, and the rest of the herd joined in, their deep voices blending into a single resonant chord that rolled out across the plains. It was more than communication. It was a signal. The rescue wasn't just near, it was about to happen. The mother shifted her stance, her weight balanced now but still guarded, as though every movement had to be calculated. She lifted her head high, scanning the open savanna ahead, the muscles along her neck tightening under the golden light. Her ears fanned wide, catching the faintest vibrations in the air. The man's legs felt heavy, his knees threatening to buckle, yet his senses were razor sharp. Every creak of the tree, every shuffle of dust beneath the elephant's feet seemed amplified in the tense silence. Even the wind had gone still, as if the entire savanna was waiting for her next move. The calves pressed tighter against her, their small, rounded heads turning toward the open path, then back to her face. One of them gave a short, questioning trumpet. She answered with a deep, resonant call, a sound that made the man's ribs vibrate. The bull remained just ahead of her, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the cracked earth. His one broken tusk caught the light like a blade, and he stood so still he could have been carved from stone. The younger elephants behind him kept shifting their weight, the tension rolling through them like a wave they were trying to contain. The man wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing dust and sweat across his skin. His mouth was dry, his breathing shallow, yet he didn't dare move closer. Any sudden action might break the delicate thread of trust between them. The mother tested her leg again, this time bending it slightly, then planting it firmly into the dirt. A low, rumbling breath escaped her trunk, curling into the air like smoke. The calves responded instantly, their bodies trembling with anticipation. Somewhere in the distance, a lone bird cried out, the sound thin and far away. The man's ears locked onto it for just a second, then tuned back to the slow, deliberate movements in front of him. The bull lowered his head slightly, his eyes never leaving the horizon. The herd behind him adjusted again, their formation tightening, their massive bodies angled toward the path. The signal hadn't been given yet, but everyone, man and elephant alike, could feel it coming. The dust that hung in the air began to settle in slow, shimmering trails, each golden particle catching the light like flecks of fire. The mother elephant's chest expanded with a long, deliberate inhale, her ribs shifting under her thick, scarred hide. When she exhaled, it came as a deep, vibrating note, one that seemed to reach the bones of everyone present. The man could feel his heartbeat matching that rhythm, steady but forceful, like the pounding of distant war drums. He kept his distance, his body angled so she could see him clearly. Every movement was measured now, every step deliberate. This was no longer about force, it was about trust. The calves were restless, their small feet stirring the dry soil into tiny clouds. One brushed its trunk across its mother's cheek. The other stepped around her front leg as though testing the space for her. She leaned into them briefly, the gesture so subtle that the man almost missed it. The bull shifted at last. Not a full step, just enough to lower his head toward her, the broken tusk glinting once more. The younger elephants responded immediately, their trunks curling and uncurling in anticipation. It was in that stillness that the man realized something. The herd wasn't just protecting her. They were waiting for her command. Her ears twitched once, twice, catching the invisible signals in the air. Then her eyes turned toward the open stretch of grass beyond the fallen tree. The way forward, the silence deepened. Even the wind seemed to retreat, holding its breath. The man's fingers twitched around the rope still lying in the dust beside him. He didn't pull, he just held it, feeling the faint tremor of his own pulse through the coarse fibers. The calves froze, the bull's eyes narrowed, and the mother shifted her weight forward. Not much, barely the width of her own foot, but enough to signal to every living thing in that space that the moment had come. The mother's forward shift was subtle, but it rippled through the herd like a spark through dry grass. The bull adjusted his stance, angling his massive frame slightly toward the fallen tree one last time. Behind him, the younger females mirrored his movements, their muscles taut beneath the layer of dust that clung to them. The calves' bodies quivered with pent-up energy, their trunks weaving in small, impatient arcs. One gave a short, sharp trumpet, but immediately fell silent at a low rumble from its mother. She needed them calm, focused. The man stepped back half a pace, his eyes darting between the mother's injured leg and the few stubborn branches still lying too close to her path. His body ached in every joint, the rope burn on his palms now raw and stinging, but adrenaline kept him standing. He knew that once she committed to moving, there would be no second chance. The path had to stay clear. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple, cutting through the dust on his skin. It fell to the ground unnoticed, absorbed instantly by the parched earth. The bull let out a deep, resonant call that vibrated through the air and into the man's chest. It wasn't just sound, it was an order. The herd tightened its half circle, creating an invisible shield around the mother and her calves. She raised her head fully now, her eyes locking onto the open savanna ahead. The fading sun threw long shadows across her body, outlining every ridge of muscle and every crease in her weathered hide. Her tail flicked once, twice, and then stilled completely. The calves pressed themselves against her legs, sensing what was about to happen. The man swallowed hard, his breath shallow, his focus unbroken. The world seemed to shrink to this single space. The mother, her young, the waiting herd, and the silent figure standing in the dust with them. The next movement she made would decide everything. The air was heavy, so still that every heartbeat felt audible. The mother's ears shifted minutely, catching sounds far beyond human hearing. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, but her weight shifted ever so slightly onto her freed leg, testing its strength again. The bull stood motionless ahead of her, his shadow long and sharp in the late sunlight. The broken tusk caught the last glints of day, while the rest of his massive frame seemed carved from the same dust-colored earth they stood upon. The younger elephant swayed gently, not from restlessness, but readiness, the way warriors might before a final push. Their trunks hovered just above the ground, muscles coiled tight beneath their thick hides. The calves huddled close, their small bodies pressed against the warmth of their mother's legs. They moved only to breathe, their tails twitching in unison, the soft brush of hair catching in the low light. The man felt the weight of the moment pressing against his ribs. His breathing slowed to match the mother's deep, steady inhales. A single fly buzzed past his ear, the sound sharp in the silence, before vanishing into the heat. Then, the mother's trunk lifted, not to feed, not to comfort her calves. She lifted it high into the air, tasting the wind. Dust swirled upward in lazy spirals, catching in the folds of her skin. The bull responded instantly with a low, rolling rumble, so deep it seemed to rise from the ground itself. The herd shifted as one, tightening their arc, bodies angled forward like a wave waiting to break. The man's fingers curled unconsciously, as though bracing himself for an impact. His eyes stayed fixed on her, on the sheer will in her stance, the unspoken command building in the charged space between her and the herd. She held still for one final breath. Then her front foot edged forward, slow but deliberate, crushing a dry twig beneath it with a sharp snap that seemed to echo far too loudly in the silence. It was the smallest of movements, but it was the signal. The signal was given. The bull surged forward, his massive shoulders slamming into the trunk one last time. The younger elephants joined instantly, their combined weight pressing into the wood with a force that made the ground quake. The calves scrambled out of the way, staying tight to their mother's side. The man didn't think. He acted. Snatching the rope from the dust, he pulled with every shred of strength left in his battered body. His back screamed, his palms burned, but the momentum was finally theirs. The tree rolled with a grinding roar, tearing free from the shallow groove in the earth. Dust exploded upward, swallowing the scene in a golden haze. Through it, the mother stepped forward. One powerful stride, then another, until her massive frame stood clear of the fallen trunk. Her freed leg trembled but held. She lifted her head and released a trumpet so loud it seemed to shake the sky itself. The calves answered in shrill harmony, circling her, pressing their trunks against her chest and legs. The bull stepped back, his task complete. For a long moment, he simply stood there, watching her. Then slowly, he turned his gaze to the man. The distance between them was no more than a few paces now. The bull lowered his trunk and with surprising gentleness, laid it briefly on the man's shoulder. A touch, a recognition. No words could ever match that moment. The herd began to move, their great bodies shifting as one. The mother and her calves fell into the center of their formation, the bull taking point, his broken tusk catching the fading light. They moved toward the open savannah, their shapes blurring into the shimmering horizon. The man stayed where he was, chest heaving, the rope hanging loosely in his hands. The dust began to settle, and with it came a profound stillness. From far off, carried on the evening wind, came a low, resonant rumble. Not a call for help, not a warning. It was gratitude. He knew he'd never hear anything like it again. If this rescue touched your heart, share it. Let the world know the power of compassion.